Torre Schumate is currently the Global Talent Development Manager at Semperis, a global cybersecurity company specializing in Active Directory and identity protection. He brings extensive experience in instructional design, coaching, and talent development, and has led leadership and performance initiatives in fast-paced international environments. Hi, Tori. Thanks for joining me today. I'm
Hey, Jordan.
really looking forward to this. It's going to be a great kickoff to Leadership Connection. So let's dive in.
I learned a long time ago that leadership, it's not something you're necessarily born with. Of course, we run into leaders all the time that have natural ability and, a lot of charisma, a lot of riz, as the kids say now. But yeah, so that happens, but it's still a skill. And, we've seen so many different leadership models that say just do this and you'll be fine. And it's all, just kind of platitudes and, listen to your employees and they're your most important asset. And we don't see a lot of concrete, this is what you need to do as a leader if you want to be an effective leader. So for years now, whether at my current company, Sempris, or my previous company or the company before that, we really tried to create leadership programs that were designed for people that may not know what to do. They're excited about their leadership role. Um, we have every reason to think that they're going to be fantastic leaders. They certainly have had prior success, or they wouldn't be in a leadership role. But that doesn't mean that they have the skill set that they need yet, or that they know what to do, or that they're not afraid. One of the biggest surprises I've had in my career is the number of really high-end leaders, up to VP, that will say, behind closed doors, I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. I was a manager before this, and I was a director for 6 months, and now I'm a VP. I've got 200 people under me. And what do I do with that? But they don't really say that out front for obvious reasons. But in L&D, we try and be aware of that. And so we try and create programs that are way more specific than you might think. We don't just throw competencies at them and pray that they're going to get it. We'll get down to, with a frontline leader, we'll get down to as specific as you need to meet with your people for 1 hour every week. And it's amazing the number of leaders I've run into who don't schedule one-on-ones with their people. And so, just to kind of say, hey, here's 5 things I need you to do next month when you're getting started. Or here's a 90-day plan, your first 90 days in a leadership role. So to that end, in my current role, we have loosely 3 programs, tightly 2 programs, and then a loose third program. We have a program that we just started called Emerging Leaders, which is targeted at high potentials who aren't in a leadership role yet. So we want to get them before they've even hit that leadership role and start giving them the skills they need. We use kind of a flipped classroom model where I give them some things to go look for, leadership models to, look at different leadership models, not just one model. Find the one that resonates for you. We talk about communicating effectively, what that means, how you do it. We talk about how to give feedback. So it's a 16-week curriculum, includes self-guided training, includes a classroom every other week where we get together and we talk about everything they learned. But I think this has been the real most important thing. We coach. So every student in my program gets individual coaching. And so we talk about what they learned, but we talk about how it applies just to them, and whether it works or not, and how it might work in their role, because it's going to be different if you're leading a team of software engineers or you're leading a team of salespeople. So we sit down individually and talk about it, and we make that a real component. So I imagine we're going to talk about coaching quite a bit with some of your questions because it's near and dear to me. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my approach to leadership now, is it's very skill focused. It's very designed to help people understand just what they should do, not generalized competencies and that sort of thing, and then working with people individually.
hmm Yeah, and I love that because they can move up the ladder so quickly, right? And so they do have an expertise in the knowledge that they've worked in, right, in that department. But yeah, leadership is not innate. And, I think it's nice that you don't really take assumptions, but also you're looking at this is a reoccurring problem, so let's just provide that support, which I think is really nice. We can all, even if someone feels like they've mastered or feel really successful in maybe one area, even still relearning and re-engaging with fellow peers that are emerging leaders. I bet that's
Yeah, absolutely. Most of us are just doing what we've seen other people do,
yeah.
which, in a lot of cases that works. I mean, mimicry is one of the ways we learn.
Mhm.
But if you learned from a leader that wasn't very effective,
Mhm.
if you are trying to do the style of leadership that works for you,
Mhm.
either of these things may just be perpetuating bad habits.
Mhm.
So, we want to create programs that are like, let's be a little bit more structured than that.
Mhm.
If you have a leadership style that really resonates with you, how are you going to apply that to different employees? What if that doesn't work for your employees?
Mhm.
Maybe you had a leader that you just absolutely loved. I guarantee somebody else on that team did not love that leader. So that's just how it goes. So let's figure out what works and what doesn't, and not just, repeat past mistakes.
And so I am curious too, just to clarify, emerging leaders, what does that,
Mhm.
what does that quantify? Who is part of that?
Yeah, so obviously high potential employees. And we have a set of criteria that we'll send out to existing leaders that say, hey, who on your team are you looking at? What's your bench look like? Who are you considering promoting in the next 6 months? That sort of thing. And then we'll get nominations. We usually get way more nominations than we have room for.
Mhm.
I usually take on about 8 at a time, and our goal is to run this about 3 times a year. So yeah, we work with the leaders to see really who is the high potential. We work with our HR business partner team and make sure that people we're putting in the program probably are the people who are our next line of leaders. But you never know when a leader is going to rise up. So we're pretty open-minded about it too. Um, just expressing it to your manager, hey, I think I might want a leadership role is enough probably to get on the radar. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. I love that. And that seems so motivating for employees. All right. Question number two.
All
So,
right.
as an educator, there's nothing we love more
Mhm.
than that light bulb moment. So,
Mhm.
to ask, what's one personal aha moment that shaped your leadership or learning philosophy?
Yeah, I have a very clear one. I started in L&D roughly 1999. I think that was my first courseware developer job was in 1999. And I didn't go to graduate school and start working on my master's until 2010. So I had about 10 years there where I thought I knew it all. But I've done this job for 10 years and I thought I knew everything there was about instructional design at that point. And I did learn a lot over 10 years. I read a lot. I did my best to educate myself. But I started graduate school and I was exposed to this idea of systems, of looking at not just the person, but the system. And I ran into this phrase that I love it. I love it to this day. I've built a workshop around it called "It's not the fish, it's the aquarium."
Mm,
And when I heard that, this light bulb went off, and it really made me start looking at what's the system look like, that people are operating in. To what extent is performance being driven by a system, not by the person?
mhm,
And to elaborate a little bit on that phrase, it's not the fish, it's the aquarium. If you have an aquarium and you walk in one morning and all the fish are barely belly up, to use a morbid example, you're not going to go, oh man, those darn fish. You're going to go, okay, what's going on in the aquarium? Is it too warm? Is it too cold? Is it salty? What's going on in that aquarium? And that changed how I approached performance problems and how I analyzed what was happening in an organization. So instead of a manager coming to me and saying, hey, you really need to work on Bob. I don't like Bob's performance. My first question prior to 2010 would have been, okay, well, tell me what Bob needs to do and let's figure out the objectives. After 2010, it was much more, okay, tell me about the work environment. Tell me about Bob's work. Who does Bob interact with? How are you responsible for Bob's report performance? What's your role in it? Another little aha moment is performance problems are often two levels up from where you think they are.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so just having that broad spectrum view of what's happening on the whole, not just with the individual, but on the whole. How is the system allowing the
Hmm.
individual to behave the way they're behaving, performing the way they're performing or not performing? What's the system getting out of that performance? What's the goals of the system? Maybe the goals of the system aren't what you think they are, you
Hmm.
know? So
Hmm.
yeah, really kind of having that thinking in systems mindset. That was a big aha for me. That took me, I think, from instructional designer to more performance analyst.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really powerful statement. Yeah, it's very easy to just say, "Oh yeah, that's the problem. Let's fix, let's find a solution. Let's fix it." And it is a little bit more, yeah, bigger picture, more questions to ask. And
Yeah, yeah. It
really,
helps you see where training can have unintended consequences,
hmm.
where often the easy way out leads right back in. You
Yeah.
start being able to see around corners a little bit better.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I think it's just been a huge game changer to the point where I've built other programs around it. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So this last question is
hmm
called sink or float. So somewhat of a hot take. um, What is one thing you see organizations routinely undervalue that you think is critical or something they keep investing in that, in your view, just doesn't deliver?
Yeah, yeah. I think if I had to put it in a nutshell, I think I've seen a lot of organizations focus very heavily on people. Okay. People in the very broad sense. People are our most valuable asset. People, people, people. But what they lose sight of is the person.
Mm,
And I think that where I'm seeing a lot of, where I'm experiencing success, but I'm also seeing it in organizations my colleagues are at, is more robust coaching. I told you we'd get back to it, right? Because coaching is by its nature an individual experience.
mhm,
Training is a people experience. I put a lot of people in a classroom,
mhm.
and we hopefully learn a lot, and we collaborate, and we may have aha moments and that sort of thing. But when that classroom's over, people go back to their old routines,
Yeah. Mhm,
unless there's very strong drivers in there trying to make that change happen.
mhm,
But I have found that when companies invest in creating person-focused, individual-focused programs like mentoring programs, a coaching program like we're trying to do at Semperis,
mhm.
then you start seeing individual movement that snowballs.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm,
uh, a lot of people don't like to go to their manager for help.
mhm.
They should, of course. And, I mean, if you've got a great manager who's your mentor and that sort of thing, it's no problem. But a lot of people, they want to impress their manager. They have very good intentions. They don't want to go to their manager and say, hey, I just don't know what I'm doing here. That's always, there's always the threat of the career-ending move there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, but having coaches on staff, whether that's your training department, whether it's your HR department or both, if you have your training department in your HR department, having coaches on staff that give people someone to go to that's on their side,
Mhm.
that's willing to sit in front of them and go, okay, tell me what your goals are.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me what have you done to achieve those so far? What's worked? What hasn't? What are you thinking? Let's see if we can see around corners. Let's come up with a plan and allow me to hold you accountable for it. But somebody that's in their corner, they're Mickey with Rocky,
Yeah.
kind of moment. So I think that is absolutely invaluable. And I think as we become more and more technology oriented, I am a huge fan of AI.
Mhm.
ChatGPT is one of my best employees,
Yeah.
so I am not a technophobe in any way, shape, or form. But as we become more technology oriented, there's that danger that we're going to lose sight of people. And
Mhm.
I feel like an organization that really spends some time going, okay, yeah, no, no, people are my best asset, but those people are persons.
Mhm.
Let's get to know those persons. Let's give those persons some resources and let's know who they are and learn who they are and, value the individual, as an individual. So, and I think that snowballs.
Yeah,
So, yeah, yeah,
absolutely. It undoubtedly snowballs. And because you can't rely on one person to always be help. You can't rely on your manager to be the only person to help you, right?
right.
So
Yeah.
how do you think people's can, do you think that, I think that a lot of companies may have resources, but maybe their employees don't know those resources exist. Have you
hmm
found that where it maybe is kind of a coveted thing that doesn't feel accessible, or what do you think? How do we make it more? How do we make coaching more accessible, or that one-on-one support more accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back to your original question on this, what do employees need to do more of or less of? Well, less of, but stop making your coaching program strictly focused on your executives. You hear executive coaching constantly, even in the field of coaching. A lot of coaches are like, oh, I'm an executive coach, because somehow or another that sets you in a higher echelon. And executive coaching is its own thing. Being an executive has its own trials, and you need a particularly skilled coach working with executives to do that. But
Mhm.
that can't be your only focus. Again, what I said, sometimes the problem is not where you think it is.
Mhm.
To focus on your executives means your middle manager is getting left out, but maybe even more importantly, your frontline people are getting left out. I think your frontline people probably need as much coaching as your executives, because they're the ones starting out. They're the ones who are, hey, I want to be where you are someday.
Mhm.
I don't know how to get there yet.
Mhm.
So, they're the ones that could really use a coach. And where I've seen success are those learning teams that have invested in taking their instructional designers, for example, and saying, "Hey, we're going to put you through coaching school." My coaching program cost $3,200. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, can you invest $3,200 in one of your instructional designers to go get certified as a coach and offer individual coaching? That seems like a smart investment, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's not a ton, now I will say that there are much more expensive coaching programs, and those are definitely worth investing in too. But this is a small investment, I think, to create a program for your frontline teams to have someone to go to say, hey, I'm a little stuck and I'm not real sure where to go. I could use somebody in my corner, somebody to hold me accountable, somebody to, light a lantern, give me a compass, and then move forward. And, what I have found is 6 to 8 sessions with a coachee. It's usually where an aha happens, where they're like, okay, I got it. Yeah, I mean, you can just see the lights come on and their confidence come in. So I think those programs are amazing. Not to say replace your training, you still need your training,
Mhm.
but wow, working with individuals, you know,
Mhm.
and I'm sure this is as true of you as it is of me. Those of us who gravitate to this field, we tend to be very, very, very interested in how humans work and helping other humans. And so I would imagine it would be the rare exception that you would find somebody on your training team or your HR team that wouldn't just relish
Mhm.
diving into that role of helping individual employees reach their goals.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It's so energizing. It's so amazing. And yeah, I completely agree. Coaching is really crucial. I think it really is crucial.
yeah, yeah.
It allows us to be seen as individuals in the collective. So Tori's recap. Empower leaders, emerging and established, by building skill-specific training programs to teach leaders how to lead. Look at the whole system when finding a solution to a problem. Ask questions to evaluate the conditions and environment of the situation. And lastly, don't lose sight of the individual. Offering coaching differentiates needs and provides specialized support for employees.
Great questions. I love them. I love them.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love your answers. I really appreciate it, Tori. Thank you so much for sharing your insightful thoughts today. Your approach and your mindset about coaching and the systems that plays into is really really can build capacity, I think, for organizations and peoples and us as a whole. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, really helpful for that leadership connection.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. My pleasure. My
See you
pleasure.
next time on Leadership Connection. Thank you.